Greetings, everyone, and welcome. I'm Meg Dorsey, public health nurse, and I'm a CIC board member and the chairperson for the CIC Education Committee, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar, as Cameron mentioned. The California Immunization Coalition hosts several education hours throughout the year on immunization-related topics to help our colleagues stay up to date on important news and information. Today, our program will feature the amazing team of Lydia Greene and Heather Simpson. These women are the co-founders of Back to the Vax. Lydia and Heather founded Back to the Vax to share their journey as a way to build a community and help support parents who are vaccinating their children after being anti-vaccine or vaccine hesitant. Today, they interview experts, they run a support group, and talk to healthcare professionals about vaccine hesitancy. Throughout the program, we encourage you to use the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A button at the bottom there. If you have any questions, feel free to type in questions throughout the program. We'll answer the questions at the end of the program as time permits. Again, as Cameron mentioned, if you're having technical difficulties, please use the chat box, and our amazing technical wizard, Cameron, will help you out. Following today's webinar, a recording will be available on the CIC YouTube channel, which you can access via the immunizeca.org website. Be sure to check it out and subscribe to our YouTube channel because there are many archived webinars that you might find interesting. So now I would like to provide a brief introduction for our speakers. Lydia Greene is a married mother of 3 who lives in the Alberta Rockies. Before having children, she was a quality control chemist. She fell down the anti-vaccine rabbit hole, and it took her over a decade to find her way out. And we're going to hear about that journey today. She is a recent nursing school graduate and is passionate about fighting vaccine hesitancy. Heather Simpson is a former viral anti-vax social media influencer who became known for dressing up as the measles for Halloween. She now advocates for vaccinations, speaking at seminars, and blogging on the subject as much as possible. She's passionate about speaking with medical professionals on how to approach anti-vax parents and patients in a way that can build trust and hopefully persuade them to vaccinate. She co-runs Back to the Vax with Lydia, and she has a 6-year-old daughter who is also very aware of the importance of vaccine. So thanks very much to both of you for being here today. I'm very much looking forward to your story and your presentation, as I'm sure all our attendees are. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lydia. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Hello. I'm so glad you invited me here. I love sharing my stories. So, okay. So as they said, I was an anti-vaxxer for over a decade, and I did manage to change my mind. I wasn't always an anti-vaxxer. When I was pregnant, I got my flu shot. I did all the prenatal visits and followed recommendations. I was not yet in that world. I took my daughter to her 2-month shots. And before that happened, I had, trouble breastfeeding, and I went to my doctor and he told me, don't be so brokenhearted about it. So I did not like that answer. And I went online and I found this group called Mothering. And some of you pediatricians might be, familiar with that group. It was a magazine as well, I think, out of Portland, Portland, Oregon. And it was quite popular about natural parenting, attachment parenting, all like the hippie granola stuff. They helped me breastfeed and they helped solve my problems. And I found a sense of community there. And I may have been exposed at that point to some anti-vaccine stuff, but I was still pretty pro-science, and I fully planned on vaccinating my daughter. I brought her into her 2-month vaccinations, and I remember feeling a little bit worried, thinking like, once I do this, I can't undo whatever happens. And my husband reassured me, and we went through with her vaccines that morning. By the time I got home that evening, she was screaming and sleeping really deeply and not wanting to nurse. And I stayed up with her all night long, and I called the public health in the morning, and I just, how she talked to me just really impacted me and set me forth on this journey to be an anti-vaxxer. She said, "You're just being a first-time mom." And I think if you really thought it was an emergency, you would take her to the ER, but everything that she's going through sounds normal to me. And I just remember feeling really embarrassed, not reassured at all, and afraid to seek further care that they would do the same thing. And so I just sat there worrying about her, watching her breathe, and just hoping she would come out of it. And by the next night she had, thankfully, but I went online because I still wanted to know what would happen. And I asked these women, you know, what's wrong? And they told me it was DTaP cry. So they said she had like cryoencephalitis, and she had pain in her head, and that's why she was screaming, and they'll never admit it. And that scared me. At her 4-month shots, I planned to skip DTaP, and I did that time. She had no reaction, but I kept talking in these groups. You can see me here trying to plan out a delayed schedule. But by the time my daughter was 6 months old, she never received another vaccine. I did not take her back for her 6-month appointment. That was all she got. So you can see here, this is me in the mothering forum. I had some encounters where, it was just vitriolic and shut me down. I felt like I couldn't express my fears about vaccination, and that also like struggling at the same time with a huge identity shift. I used to have my own career, and now I have this little life I'm taking care of, and I'm just a housewife now. Like it was a lot to deal with, and I had no support through that. And then on top of that, when I go to healthcare, they treat me, like, do you want your kid to die? And just like look at me sideways. And it was not easy. And there was no productive conversations at that point. So I had 2 more kids. At this point, I was heavily in, my forums in my community. I did not vaccinate either kid. Here you could see me like questioning for like travel purposes. Should I have a few vaccines? Should I vaccinate my kids? But every time, because I was asking an echo chamber, I made the same choice. So I always fell back to just not vaccinating, because at that point it was working for us. Like I was very fortunate that herd immunity was the thing, and I didn't have to worry about too much of my kids getting sick, and they didn't. So yeah, there's probably opportunities for me along the way, but because I felt I couldn't talk about it, I kept not vaccinating my children. So a lot of people turned anti-vax in the pandemic, but for me, that's actually what drove me out of it. I was wondering like what was going on with the economy. They're rationing food at the grocery store. People are acting a bit bonkers with the toilet paper stuff. And I started thinking, like, what if I can't access healthcare or vaccination? And what if like the things that I rely on, the systems, the government, amenities and things like that fall through, and now I can't do the vaccines that could potentially help should like, basic healthcare and sanitation, go wayside. And one of the questions I asked is like, when can I vaccinate my youngest? Because I believe this trope about the blood-brain barrier forming at age 2 or 3, and he was 2 at the time. So I started to research that, and I find out I'm like, not a little wrong, like really wrong. There's no actual magic age. Babies are born with an intact blood-brain barrier. There's nothing to suggest otherwise. So I feel shocked and have to like sit with being wrong about that and start asking myself more questions about the things I believed about vaccination. It was kind of like the catalyst that really made me want to venture outside the echo chamber. I start researching like crazy. I spent hours on Vaxopedia. Voices for Vaccines has an excellent catalog of people who, changed their mind like I was about to. So I read a lot of those stories. Having a nurse work with me, that was so important. I called and I explained, and I said, I'm really scared still. I'm really anxious. And she just said, you know what? You do what you're comfortable with. I'm just going to keep track of what's left and we'll just go from there. Do what you're comfortable with. And it was just really nice to have no pressure to like in terms of like how fast I caught up my kids. And the first vaccine was really hard. I'm not gonna lie, I had to take an Ativan to get through it. That's a common thing to have severe anxiety, even once you realize that it's probably going to be okay. Parents like us really struggle with anxiety around vaccination. But seeing with my own eyes that my children were okay really helped me continue vaccinating. And I eventually went to an accelerated schedule because I quickly realized that, with older children, they know what a needle is and they hate it. And so I just wanted to get it over with. So, they're just as stressed over 3 vaccines as they are over 1. So I finished as fast as I could. And at this time, I started talking to experts, and they were very supportive and very accessible and just answered my questions anytime I had them. Heather and I found each other. I saw an article she wrote for Voices for Vaccines, and I had to reach out to her. So I started snooping around and asking people, and I reached out to her, and we started wanting to give parents like us a community. And I was able to support her through her daughter's first vaccines because I had been through it. We wanted others to have that support. We made our website support group. We have a Facebook group with over 200 parents in it that are, we celebrate when people vaccinate their kids, no matter if it's 1 or 3 or whatever, if they're able to even just make that appointment. That's such a huge thing. And I have a podcast, like Heather and I interview experts that, can address the tropes and dismantle them for our listeners. And we want people to vaccinate with confidence. We don't allow myths to be shared. We don't allow, I'm doing Dr. Sears delayed schedule. No, we're not talking like that because there's no reason to delay other than your own anxiety. It's evidence-based. Kids can handle, the schedule just fine. We do support if I'm too nervous, we support them through that, but we just don't allow the idea that, vaccines are something you need to detox from and it's an assault to your child's body. So if the AAP doesn't recommend, we don't recommend it either, and we don't allow it in the group. We have to listen to people. I really feel like if the very first time someone would have listened to me, maybe I wouldn't have, gone the route I did. And I know when somebody does share misinformation in an appointment, it's so easy to want to just shout them down or shut them down because you think they're just going to breathe life into this myth right in front of you. But just listen and be open to it. Ask, I've never heard that before. I'm interested too. I'm going to look into that. Like it disarms people if you're willing to listen to them, empathize, ask questions. And if they try to bring up too many things, I really recommend you just stick to one topic, because a common defense for us is to, I'm sure you've seen those tropes online with the 50 questions about vaccines and it's a defense mechanism because nobody can answer 50 questions on the spot. So I would say, bring me one concern. We're going to go through one concern. What's the biggest concern for you? And if they start to add other concerns, say, sorry, we're going to go just through this one for now. So until until we get through it together, then we can talk about the next one. And it really does allow you to explore a concern fully, as most of the tropes are very surface level and can be easily debunked, but it takes time. Be patient. You're not going to extinguish all the fears in one visit, but you want them to come back to you. Can they call you? Is there a text line or an email or something that they can ask their questions to along the way that you can answer at your leisure? I know time is a valuable resource, but these parents really do need a lot of reassurance, especially for the first vaccination. Like that first one, if you can get them that first one, guarantee you'll get them for more. But just that first vaccine is going to take a lot more effort. Another thing I realize is that a lot of people who believe in conspiracy theories and anti-vax stuff tend to have trauma. So, trauma-informed care is so important, and we're hearing about that more and more. I have medical trauma, having Crohn's disease. Everyone has bad days in healthcare. Patients are on the receiving end of that, and they will never forget how they feel. And you have to understand, like, you might forget about them. They will never forget how you made them feel that day. And so it's important to realize that some people might have trauma like that, especially if they do have illness. Trust has been fractured. There's so much mixed messaging going on. I think the pandemic has collectively wounded our society, and people found various ways to cope with that uncertainty, like conspiracies. People want to feel in control. I wanted to feel in control. We have a long road ahead. There's so many people who have titles by their names, that are selling confirmation bias. And people don't understand why this doctor who says vaccines are bad is not, their opinion's not valuable compared to the rest of them. So it's really hard to dismantle that. It's going to take a long time to repair this. So we have to remember to celebrate the wins along the way, no matter how small. Otherwise, we're going to go crazy. I changed. I've given vaccines now. I just graduated. I'm an LPN now. It's like a complete 360. I went from thinking, being very scientific, to thinking vaccines were poison, and now I give vaccines out without a second thought. And so it's been, interesting journey, but people can change. I changed. It just requires some patience, and it was thankfully people were willing to talk to me along the way. So I don't know if you've heard of our booklet. Heather and I co-authored a booklet. It has all the tropes that we, were obsessed with, how we realized we were wrong about them. We have consulted experts along the way to make sure we are giving the right information, because we also realize we are not experts. And I think it even just giving it to before people even have children, because I think that if people are aware that these tropes are out there, when they hear, Auntie Lydia coming up to them at their baby shower going, have you heard of vaccines? Like, it's going to give your kids autism. Like, they'll just go, yeah, okay. Like, so it's good to have that, I think, information ahead of time. I know there are some people that fear maybe introducing the tropes before they know about them might put the idea in their head, but the anti-vaxxers are out there, and they're already planting those ideas. They're going to hear those ideas probably a dozen times before they even make it to their first prenatal appointment. So I think we need to get ahead of it. Hesitancy is easier to address, but anti-vaxxers can change as well. Thank you so much for listening to my story. And I'll hand it over to Heather.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Just regular disclosure so you can move on. And who I was as a public anti-vaxxer. I like to show these posts just so that y'all can see. I say y'all a lot, by the way. I'm in Texas. How kind of awful I was. There's the measles post. That was just dumb. And I mean, as a concept in general, but you dress as something scary for Halloween. So I was like, well, I have to come up with something that makes this make sense, because then they're going to think I'm scared of measles. So I was trying to think of the least scary thing I could be. So I became the measles. So it was just stupid all around. It doesn't even really look truly like the measles. It was bad. And I tell people that's when I discovered Reddit. I called my brother and I was like, what is Reddit? I'm on the front page of that. Is that bad? And he was like, oh my God, because he's very pro-vaccine. He was like, please just get off the internet. This is our chance. Save the family name. Oh my gosh. And I did not listen to him. But yeah, so that was a crazy time in my life. I never dreamed of becoming an anti-vax influencer. I don't like saying those words with my mouth because they're very cringe to say. I don't like that that's even a thing, and that's still a thing. But one day I decided to post about my beliefs. I had seen other girls post. It's mostly a lot of women, a lot of moms. There are some dads on the online Facebook anti-vax community, but a lot of moms. And I had seen moms start posting about their anti-vax beliefs, and I was like, ooh, that's really brave. And then I was kind of intrigued, and I just kind of stalked them a little bit. And one day I posted my first kind of anti-vax post, and I thought I was just so brave, and it just blew up. And it seems like a week later there were 12 hate groups about me from the pro-vax side, and I mean, there were just memes about me, and they made me into like the it clown at one point, which I was really impressed by, actually. That was kind of, I mean, just the editing was remarkable. But it was just, I was like the face of the hate for the pro-vaccine movement, which I'm also passionate about that reaction in and of itself, because I was literally told to kill myself, like probably 5,000 times, at least 100 times a day for a while. Who I actually was. So I was living in West Texas with my ex-husband and my daughter, Charlotte. There she is. She's 6 years old. She's a little sass queen. And she had a lot of health issues when she was born. I bought this little sock monitor to monitor her oxygen right when she was born, because I was a first-time mom. I was freaking out, and it went off. The sound went off, and it said 70% oxygen. And the doctors were like, well, I think it's just periodic breathing. I think you're just a first-time mom, you just need to calm down, which, always works when you tell a woman to calm down. But I was looking into periodic breathing, and hers went on for hours upon hours, until she was blue, and her oxygen was 60%. And I just begged them, and they said, just stop using that sock. It's not FDA approved. You need to go to sleep, wake up every couple hours, check on her, see if she's purple, which, no. So I set my alarm every 20 minutes for the first couple months that she was born. I mean, I was so sleep deprived. I finally got the sleep study from my pediatrician, drove 5 hours to the sleep doctor. They said, we're not going to do a sleep study. You're just a new mom. This is anxiety. Right at that moment, she fell asleep, right at that moment, and started doing the periodic breathing. So the doctor said, we'll grant you the sleep study just for your anxiety. Well, that night, they couldn't even complete the sleep study because severe sleep apnea is 44 or 40 events per hour, and hers was 144. So they transferred her to ICU, where they thought she would die. She had to be on oxygen just to keep her alive for a few months. And that was how I started off, right when she was born, just not trusting the medical system. I was terrified, and I was alone in West Texas. My ex-husband at the time worked 70 hours a week. We didn't have family nearby. I was not sleeping. I, at that point, not only did not trust the medical community, but I thought, if I put anything into my tiny precious baby, like, she will die. I mean, this is not a matter of if, it's definitely she'll die that night. I mean, this is not. And I would look at my friends in my Bible study group. They would just vaccinate on schedule like it was nothing. They had no anxiety about it. And I was sad. I wanted to be normal, but I couldn't, because I felt like I can't trust the doctors you guys trust. I can't trust anything about anything going on, because they told, had I trusted them, she wouldn't even be here to be vaccinated. I was just completely traumatized. So I was never trying to be this evil anti-vax person. It just kind of became a thing, and I was welcomed into this community that offered answers. That they offered answers for her sleep apnea. They listened to me. They welcomed me in. I tried to reach out to my pediatrician at the time, and she basically was not having it. She did not want to talk about vaccines, especially my questions. And so I didn't know where else to turn but online, and they definitely welcomed me. And I see that a lot. So this is how I got into the anti-vaccine movement at all. We got all of our shots growing up. Me and my 3 brothers, we still kind of faint at the sight of needles. I got a shot the other day, and I had to hold my husband's hand in the cold sweat. I am terrified. And my brother straight up passes out. So it's still, you know, we hated it, but we got them all. My mom encouraged me to vaccinate my daughter. She would say something like, well, what if she gets measles? What if, you know, like what if she's the one that dies? So she was always like kind of pushing me to vaccinate her. So I grew up normal. I mean, honestly, you know, Tylenol, Motrin, antibiotics, all the things. Um, it wasn't until I was about 25 years old. Uh, I swear Facebook reads your mind. I stumbled upon I want to say it's 9 hours, a docu-series called The Truth About Vaccines. I always tell people, don't make it a drinking game. You'll die. Like, like they promise to be in the middle ground, docu-series type of film, but it's definitely anti-vax. Definitely. And so RFK Jr. was on it. And I kind of attribute my anti-vax background to him. I don't think people understand how influential he is because he says he's not anti-vax, because all of his kids are vaccinated. And he says, I'm pro-safe vaccines. Well, aren't we all? So he was interviewed a lot on that docu-series. And by the time I watched all of it, and I did watch all of it, it was a lot. I wrote many notes. I was convinced that if I could avoid vaccines, my future children would not get autism, allergies, autoimmune conditions, cancer, common cold, literally anything. I mean, they attributed everything ever to vaccines. So I was like, well, I'm not a monster, so I'm not gonna vaccinate my future children now that I know what I know. What can be done? Well, the response from my medical providers. So this is where it started to go south. I finally got pregnant, which that was another thing. I couldn't get pregnant for 2 years. I went through all of the injections, all of the things, and it just wasn't happening. And I talked to my doctor and I said, hey, do you think that maybe my diet could be affecting it? And he was completely closed off to that idea whatsoever. He was like, absolutely not. And it turned out now I have like an allergic condition where I don't even know the right words. I'm not even going to try to explain. It's so complicated. My immunologist is an incredible doctor. But it turned out that when I cut out everything I was allergic to, which is a lot, and I just ate just the things I could handle, I was pregnant within 2 weeks. And so I started off kind of like, that's kind of weird that he was so glued to only the concept of injections and nothing else. What if I had only listened to him and she was never born? I mean, it kind of made me think like, oh, that's very black and white. And then when I would start to talk about vaccines with doctors, they would just kind of quote, vaccines are safe and effective. And that's it. That's it. It was very robotic sounding. And when I talked to my OB/GYN about it, I had to get my tetanus shot, and I brought up polysorbate 80, and with the look on his face, he had not heard of that. He just looked at me and he said, you're not one of those crazy anti-vaxxers, are you? And I was so embarrassed. I mean, I was mortified. I just beat red, shut down, end of conversation. That was it. So we didn't get to have a conversation about that at all. And like I said, once my daughter was born and we had the appointment with her pediatrician, I talked to her about this docuseries because that really was to blame for all of it. And she just said, I won't talk about it. And I was like, okay, I'm so sorry. Like, I think I cried in the car. I didn't have anyone. I didn't know who to ask. Nobody wanted to talk to me. I was mortified, embarrassed. I was so embarrassed. And I found the community online after that, and they definitely welcomed me. So what made me change my mind? So that's the big question. I developed this following, which is wild to me because I would get so many messages every day just asking me medical questions and I wouldn't respond, but just the fact that they viewed me with no medical background as someone that they could ask a medical question to, that is the power of being an influencer or whatever online. And there are so many wellness influencers doing the same thing right now. It is so scary. Once COVID hit, I kind of started to get, I say the ick because my daughter says the ick. I kind of started to get the ick from my followers because they started fighting for freedom against wearing a mask. And I was just like, it's just a mask. Like, is that real? Let's not be that dramatic. You could save a whole entire life. Like, I'm all for not injecting things into your body, but it's a mask. And that kind of led me to start thinking like, hey, is this really about vaccines or is this more about you wanting to be able to send your kids to school on your rules? And I kind of started talking about that online and they did not love that. I brought up like, you pay taxes, but you don't get to decide the road structure. I mean, you don't get to decide these things. And when it comes down to it, I realized that not everyone can homeschool, but you're not actually being forced to vaccinate. You're living in a society that has structure and rules. Might be a little bit entitled. Maybe we're coming at this at a different angle. And I just wanted to talk to my followers about this, but they immediately were like, we're done with you. I mean, it was an excommunication. I had a major panic attack. It was horrible. It was so bad. And I'm so glad that happened though. It was a mix of that and then them being anti-mask that got me excommunicated from the cult, which I stand by that. It is a cult. That led me down just exploring that maybe I could possibly be wrong. I obviously had anxiety just from her health issues and things like that. But I would notice like if I let her play outside barefoot, I would think, well, what if she cuts herself and gets tetanus? And it was just a constant living in fear. And I noticed that with other anti-vaxxers, it wasn't like they weren't scared of tetanus. They were scared of these things for the most part. A lot of them were, but they were more scared of the shots. There's a book called The Vaccine Book by Dr. Bob Sears. I'm not a huge reader. I try to read when I can, but I don't have a ton of time to do it. So the first part of the book is him basically just listing the vaccines and the diseases that they vaccinate for, how severe those diseases could be, and then the side effects of the vaccines. And this is the first time I had seen a doctor list things like encephalitis, but he listed it in such a way that it was like, okay, yes, that could possibly happen, but the likelihood is, and he didn't say this, but the way he worded it, he put it in such a perspective that is like, yeah, this is possible, but you could also get struck by lightning 7 times in the same spot before that would happen or something like that, he put it in perspective without gaslighting me and making me think that there's no bad side effect to any drug ever. We all know that. We've all seen the commercials. I mean, obviously that's not true. It's just a matter of benefit versus risk. And he told me how small the risk actually is. It is so minuscule and how bad the diseases actually are. And they are very bad. The anti-vax world wants you to believe that, measles can be treated with a little bit of vitamin A. No. It's really bad. You can get it in your brain and not even know it and then die 5 years later, 10 years later. I mean, it's not just, let's take some vitamin A. And so I read all that and I was just like, oh my gosh, he's telling the truth. He's actually not gaslighting. He's actually just laying down the facts that rare things can happen, but this is how rare it is. And it is okay. Well, the second part of the book that I never actually read was him talking about how horrible all the ingredients are and how you actually shouldn't probably vaccinate. It was a very weird book. And I never actually read the second half. So I never got to that part. So I attribute that book to really helping me be pro-vaccine. And he is very anti-vax. So yeah, I also talked to some doctors and scientists online, and I said, hey, I really want to be able to vaccinate, but I have some legitimate questions, and I don't think y'all can prove me wrong because I know that I'm right. I know that y'all are blood-brain barrier specialists or whatever, but I don't think you can't prove me wrong. And I said, I think like with the tetanus shot, I know that aluminum gets into the brain and it causes inflammation. And that's what we see as autism. And they said, okay, so take any study that any anti-vaxxer sites, go to the methods section, guarantee is talking about environmental aluminum in the brain. It's never talking about vaccine aluminum, because vaccine aluminum is I don't have those actual details. It's not fat soluble, I believe, and it's too big to fit through the blood-brain barrier. It literally physically cannot. And I was like, okay, well, well, what about polysorbate 80? Wrapping around the aluminum and kind of being a Trojan horse to get through the blood-brain barrier, because us anti-vaxxers really believe that that was true. And they said that came from a study about 40 years ago done that showed that given enough polysorbate 80 injected straight into the neck, you have a chance at opening up the BBB. But that's not even a real thing that we get to use for like anti-brain cancer drugs. That would be amazing if we could do that. But they said take a newborn getting their hepatitis B shot, about 8 pounds. You would need about 3,600 doses of hepatitis B shot injected straight to their neck to even have a shot at opening it up. That just blew my mind. Like everything that I believed was just taken down, like biologically impossible facts were just being laid out. And I know that they say feelings trump facts, but for me, those facts were so huge because I could not get around those facts. I wrote them down on a paper and held them for her first shot. That's her getting her first shot. This helps me the most. I used to hate Dr. Offit and all politicians and doctors and everything like that. Hate is a strong word, but I really thought they were of the devil, I guess, evil people. I just, like, me and my followers just did not like them. But Dr. Offit let me call him and just go unhinged on him about my daughter's first shot, which was the polio vaccine. And he was like, this is normal to be scared. Like, anxiety in parents is normal. That doesn't make you weird. That doesn't make you an anti-vaxxer. This is normal. This is your baby. She's gonna be fine. The fact that he took time to talk to me was huge. And I realized that he cannot call every single person in America or the world and talk to them about their child's first vaccine, but just the fact that he cared and that he cares about his kids. He vaccinated his kids. My pediatrician gave me his cell phone number and said, if she so much as hiccups tonight or this whole week, text me if it scares you, which she actually had more energy, a bigger appetite than ever before after her first vaccine. And everything was fine, but just having that access to him, that was huge. He knew I was just completely freaked out. Just seeing how the first shot was so easy for her. I mean, she hated it, don't get me wrong, but that was huge. Knowing he would not just hang up on me or just not answer or tell me to go to the ER or anything because he could not be bothered. That access was huge. And then I firmly believe in allowing the slow schedule because of people like me that have anxiety. Had my pediatrician said, hey, I'm only going to allow you to do this if you give her 6 shots the first visit, otherwise you're out. I would still be an anti-vaxxer, hands down guarantee. Like Lydia said, once you get past that anxiety, it's like, okay, let's just get as many as you can give in one shot. Like, the combo shots, 1 injection, let's go. Now, but at the time, that would have pushed me so far away, so far away So just allowing that, knowing that they're probably going to not always be on the slow schedule, but as frustrating as it is, pushing someone out for having anxiety about a slow schedule, they will find the anti-vax community that will welcome them. They will find an anti-vax doctor that will welcome them, and you have a completely unvaccinated 5-year-old versus a slowly vaccinated 5-year-old. As frustrating as it was, I just believe that that is something that should be kept allowed in offices. Oh, and this is use us and other resources. You can keep going to the next page. This is that's the QR code. It's kind of wonky for the book that we wrote for IKC, Immunize Kansas, from a CIC grant. This is basically taking really hard language and putting it in really simplified language from all the questions that we had when we were anti-vaxxers about just vaccines in general, about the schedule, and about the COVID vaccine, and the literal science broken down in plain language. And we've had a lot of doctors and nurses and scientists approve it and read over it, make sure everything's accurate. So it's being spread to a lot of different pediatric offices. They don't just hand the whole thing over to patients usually because they don't want to introduce like a new fear that the patient may not have thought of yet. But if they have a question, especially like vaccine mercury, vaccine aluminum, they might hand out those pamphlets. So that's been really helpful. And finally, don't lose hope. I mean, that was my t-shirt that I sold in 2019. That was the World Health Organization listed anti-vaxxers as on the top 10 global health threats. And I was very proud of that. So I made that t-shirt and I sold it and they bought it and we all wore it, and I was the worst. So if I could change, and now I'm speaking on the importance of vaccines now, and trying to really affect policy and get really deep into it and really make changes. If I can get to that point, and I was me, then anyone, I mean, most people can be reached. So yeah, don't lose hope. And that's the end. Oh, that's my contact info. It's Back to the Vax if you have any questions.
Okay, well, thank you both very much for fascinating presentations, and both emotional and inspiring. So thank you so much. Before we start our conversation with questions, I'd like to just remind everyone that following this program, an evaluation will pop up on your screen. And it's very important to us. We really appreciate your responses to the evaluation. The California Immunization Coalition produces at least 3 to 4 educational programs per year, and we really rely on your feedback for preparing the calls, improving them, and also if you have any suggestions for topics that you might be interested in, please feel free to share them. So today, for our question and answer period, I'm joined by my colleague, my friend, and my fellow CIC board member, who is also the president of the vice president of the California Immunization Coalition, as well as vice president of the California chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. So I'm glad you're here with us today, Eric. I'm sure this is very germane to your world as a practicing pediatrician. So I'd like you to go ahead, Eric. Welcome you to go ahead with your first question.
Lydia, Heather, thank you so much for joining us. This was amazing. It's really good to hear from this perspective that we kind of frontline practitioners don't really hear very much. And my first question is from one of our listeners, and I had the same question. And this is primarily for Heather. What do you think your psychology or the psychology of people who are anti-vax to kind of evangelize it? I understand, it's almost becomes like a religious thing where you're trying to convert people and to spread the word about the harms of vaccines. I would think from a medical perspective, you would want everybody else to vaccinate, right? So that your kid could be protected, because if everyone listened to you, then these diseases would run wild. So why do you think you were so out there as far as like making t-shirts and getting dressed up on Halloween and posting and becoming essentially an evangelist for anti-vaccines?
I used to tell people, quite literally, post about if I could save one kid from getting vaccinated, all of this would be worth it. I truly thought that it would either kill them or harm them so detrimentally that it would be just catastrophic. I really truly thought I was saving lives.
So
I didn't think that the herd immunity was helping. I thought there was shedding. I didn't hope for more kids to be vaccinated to protect my daughter because I didn't believe in herd immunity. None of us really did.
So for those of us who are involved in social media and, see these messages come across, we've always been taught to, quote, don't feed the trolls, right? So that if I posted something and then you posted some anti-vax thing, the way that I've always been taught was to just ignore what you're saying and try to pretend that this doesn't exist and just continue posting my pro-vaccine messages. Do you think that's an effective strategy, or would you do something different on our side?
I've seen a lot of pro-vaccine coalition type of posts, and it's very they're very polite, very, do it for the community, it's safe and effective, and join hands. And the anti-vax side is not very polite, and there's something that's not working. I think that the fear of offending might be too strong on the pro-vaccine side, and that it does kind of need to match the energy. And I'm not saying, bully or anything like that, but ignoring, I don't think it's been working. I think kind of getting more head on with social media
Yeah.
is a better approach.
I spend a lot of time on Twitter, which is like an anti-vax cesspool. And I answer not because they're going to change their mind per se, but like there are people that are exploring this new idea of not vaccinating. And so they're reading the comments as well. They may not comment because they don't know enough to comment either way, but I do respond with factual information regardless, even though I know they're being disingenuous in asking it. I made a post go viral recently because they have this meme that they share with 50 questions, and it's actually more like 43 questions because a few of the questions are repeats, and I don't even think they read their own questions. It's just a viral thing they share to gish gallop and run away. And I said, I'll bite, I'll do it. So I went through and I made this huge thread. I answered every question, and I think it had something almost like 500,000 views. I didn't expect it to do that, but it did. And it's because that's what they do. They gish gallop and then they run away thinking, oh, yeah, you can't do that. And I'm like, you know what? I just did. There you go. And now people that are like, oh yeah, what about those questions, who are not anti-vax yet can read that and go, oh, there are answers. Because they act like there's no answers, but there actually are answers to their questions. They just don't want to hear them. Or they'll be like, not like that. They'll be like, there's no placebo trials. I'm like, here's some. Oh, I didn't mean those. It's always like a goalpost move with them. And it's very, very cult-like. And Heather and I both agree, like it is very cult-like. We even interviewed a cult expert. She's a cult and terrorism expert. We were talking about the tactics while you're in it and the tactics after you leave, and very, very cult-like behavior. And so I even tell them that, and they're like, I have a cult expert agreeing, like that it is. So too bad. And they'll be like, oh, sure. Because like, of course, any expert that says something they don't like is not a real expert. But yeah, it's very, and I do agree. Like when I heard my family members vaccinating their kids, I was genuinely scared for their children. I felt sick to my stomach. I thought I wanted health freedom, but I also didn't want people to vaccinate their kids because I didn't think they were making an informed choice. So they actually don't really believe that either.
Thank you both so much. I've got another question here. Both of you in your presentations characterized one of the reasons why you sort of went down that anti-vax rabbit hole was because of the way you were treated early on by healthcare professionals who either dismissed you or refused to dialogue with you, or maybe just were uninformed. So it seems as though that was kind of an impetus for you to take the journey that you did into the world of anti-vax. My question is, Do you think that if you had had a very positive, supportive interaction early on, that you would have still found your way to the anti-vax world?
I always wonder, like, what would have happened if that nurse said, "Oh, I'm sorry you're concerned. Let's have a look at her. Bring her in." I really feel like it would have ended differently if she would have just said, "That does sound concerning. Let's have a look at her. Bring her in." You know, and I feel like we could have had a chance to talk even further about it. Um, it wasn't even explained that she was in pain. Like, it was just that's normal. But if she would have said, like, have you ever had a tetanus shot? They're very painful. They leave like a knot in your muscle. They're very painful. She's crying because she's in pain. You know, but none of that was discussed, and I feel like it could have gone a lot differently.
For me, I think the biggest thing wasn't even that my OB-GYN didn't have a conversation with me. It was that he did not know the things I was saying. He didn't know any of the ingredients I was talking about. Like, he just said they were safe and effective. And I was like, I swear if I hear those words one more time, oh my gosh. And I just started to realize, does anybody know these ingredients? Like, do they know, have they heard of these questions? And I kind of explored around and I realized a lot of them didn't know. And had he known the things that I was scared of and had gotten ahead of it, and I mean, that's, that's our next kind of big project that we're applying for, is um to create some kind of way for medical professionals to get ahead of these anti-vax conspiracies and know the ingredients they're going to ask about that you've never had to encounter, because of course it's safe, but it would have instilled so much confidence in me had he known, and had he been able to say, well, this is why that is even a myth, this is from that study, and this is why XYZ, and break it down like on a very biologically molecular type of level. I kind of think that, I mean, I'm very logic minded. I kind of think it would have gone differently, but it basically called me stupid and he didn't know what I was talking about. So yeah.
I would strongly encourage everybody in the chat. Lydia has posted a link to their booklet, both in English and Spanish. It's really helpful because, Heather, I have to admit, like, the stuff you're talking about is stuff that generally is irrelevant to most of us. Like, I don't think about the ingredients in Tylenol or the antibiotics I prescribe. And so, like, we who are on the science end of things just kind of have an assumption that, like, this was made by someone who was approved by someone who knows what they're doing. And so therefore, like, I'm totally cool with that. And I think acknowledging that some people do have some anxiety about this and fear this, for us to educate ourselves about these, even though, again, it does sound somewhat ridiculous to me because I don't have an issue with it. It doesn't to some of our families. And I think you guys do an excellent job in this booklet of laying that out and kind of just, I mean, it's great. It's just basically a bullet point of all the stuff you were afraid of and how you can respond to it. So I'd encourage everyone to check that out. It's really well done. So thank you for doing that. And on that, we have time for like one more question, but my question for you is, so in my practice, I'm in Orange County, California. We were kind of in the heart of the Disneyland measles outbreak, and we had 3 cases just in my practice alone. And we had an exposure in our waiting room, and where we had like dozens of babies exposed to measles in our waiting room. And at that point, we decided, we were very lax about vaccines before that. And at that point, we're like, we're done. We can't have unvaccinated people here potentially getting these other kids sick. And we closed our practice off to people who weren't going to vaccinate. Now we do delayed schedules and we accommodate people like you guys talk about. But I'm just wondering, so if your pediatrician, when you went in for that 2-month appointment, or Lydia, after your child had the reaction to DTaP, said, we're done, you got to find a new provider, do you think you'd be here right now?
I don't know. That's a hard question. So the thing about anti-vaxxers is that they'll go to other professionals. So I was taking my daughter to a chiropractor for checkups for a bit. And I know that's insane. But I felt I could talk about our health choices with him. And yeah, I felt like that was someone else, a professional laying eyes on her development was good enough. And because I did get, even like when I went to my GP, Canada does a lot of GPs. We don't really see pediatricians unless there's an actual issue. But I didn't feel comfortable having these discussions. And so for a while I was taking her to a chiropractor, and that's what they'll do. They'll take their children to people that have no business monitoring the development of children. Unfortunately.
I wanted to say real quick, we just moved an hour away from our old pediatrician. So we were trying to find a new one, and I did not realize the stance of this new pediatrician. And I went to get her shot the other day because she's still getting caught up. Her dad is, we have differing views, my ex-husband, and this pediatrician straight up said, no, we will not be doing her shot today. Her body can't handle.
Okay, so folks, we're getting to the top of the hour, and I actually want to sneak in one more question, but it has to be super brief so we can wrap up. It's a little bit different from the medical questions. One of our listeners asked, what do you do in a social situation? Are you willing to engage in a social situation in these topics, or do you tend to just be quiet and step back? And we just have seconds.
I like to evaluate how I feel at the time and see if I'm not in the headspace, I'll leave it alone, because I think you can do more damage than good if you're not in the right headspace. So I do a self-check first. But yeah, I will have those conversations with people.
He engages more like an Uber than I do. And real quick, I want to say I threw that out there because obviously we're finding a different pediatrician that does vaccinate, but there are pediatricians out there that will find, or that they can find, that will definitely allow vaccines. And we just accidentally found them, and that was horrifying. But yeah.
Well, thank you both for that. So I just want to thank you both again so much for being here with us and sharing your insights and your experience with us on this very important topic. Those of us in the immunization community really value hearing from parents, especially ones such as yourself who's taken this really profound journey. So thank you again for sharing. I would like to mention a very important save the date. The CIC will be holding its annual immunization summit. Go back to my immunization summit in Sacramento on June 5th and 6th. So please mark your calendar. This is a really terrific event every year. I also want to mention that immediately following this program, an evaluation will automatically pop up on your screen. And it's an opportunity for you to tell us what your thoughts are about this webinar. So please take a moment and fill this out for us. We really do appreciate it, and it helps inform us to do the best possible job we can do going forward. So thank you again to our speakers, and a very big thanks to all of you for spending a portion of your day with us.